Good afternoon, welcome to our live. Today we are going to film this live session in a few steps due to the fact that we need to wait in between coats for the paint to dry. We need to wait in between for the glaze to dry. We are going to have several paint techniques and steps on this old item that I purchased from a second-hand store. We have cleaned it already with Power Fix lacquer thinners. I've done that already because after you've cleaned it, it's raining here today. You will hear raindrops falling. How amazing is that? But once you have thoroughly cleaned it, take a cloth, wear gloves, make sure there's enough ventilation in your room. Thoroughly wet your cloth with the lacquer thinners and wash the furniture piece off. You will see the last section that I've cleaned a little while back still had some oil on it. And then you wipe and wipe until your cloth is clean. And then you know the cleaning work was done properly. And then you allow for 40 minutes drying time before you start painting. We've already allowed our furniture piece to dry for 40 minutes after cleaning it with lacquer thinners. It was a previously varnished surface. It hasn't been varnished for the past 6 months. I did ask from the second-hand store as well where I purchased it from. And then you can start painting. My base coat I'm going to paint in Don's Wash. So Don's Wash is a very nice warm neutral grey. A warm grey is a colour that will complement other colour schemes. It is not a grey that will have a blue finish to it. Some cold greys can seem blue, especially in different tones of light. And then I'm going to start to paint. Your first coat is always the most important coat, as this is the foundation for everything else to follow. And I want to share some tips with you as I progress. I'm making use of a Hamilton's Enzyme brush. Let me see if I can, sorry, I dipped it in the paint. So there you can see Enzyme. It's an Enzyme 50 millimeter brush. And if you want to remove, it gives a very even, smooth finish. And your first coat is never perfect. I'm going to show you now what you can do to get rid of any streakiness. So I paint a nice even coat onto my furniture piece. I've removed the hardware here and I'll just screw them back on afterwards to make sure you get rid of any streakiness while the paint is still wet. I will use a foam roller. This is a 110 millimeter foam roller, and just on top of my paint I will just roll. So what you can see, it's a very even application, but it's also a very thin, smooth application, just to get rid of any streakiness so that I know my foundation is even, it's smooth, it's beautiful. Then at a later stage, you don't need to be worried about streakiness, seeing streaks underneath. So more coats will be required, but this gives a very even finish to your surface. But you need to do this while the paint is still wet. I'm going to paint the inside. Now yes, crevices and grooves. This won't be that easy to work with a foam roller, but just make sure you paint nicely and evenly. And the first coat is never a perfect coat, it's a foundation coat. Now with Tjhoko paint you don't need a primer. This is my first coat of my paint color I want to use. Nicely, evenly. and enjoy every step of the transformation. Okay, my first coat is on and it's not perfect, and I want to show you so that you don't get an anxiety attack after your first coat of paint. The most important is that it's done evenly, smoothly, and a smooth foundation for everything that needs to follow. So here I've just touched up because I could see that I've had a problem in the corner, but there is an even roll with a foam roller. This side Crystal has rolled, so there she used a foam roller just to spread out an even coat of her first coat, and this side I did, and you can see how it differs from my hand to Crystal's hand, but the most important part is it's even. There I see unevenness, so I'll rather even it. And now I wait, very important. Do not paint onto wet coats of paint. That's also when unevenness occurs. So allow your first coat of paint to dry. It is a cloudy, rainy day here today. I'm going to give it 40 minutes and then I'm going to continue with my second coat. My first coat of paint is completely dry and now I'm going to start with my second coat. So it's Don's Wash I'm working with, a beautiful neutral, and you can see immediately the difference in application. Enzyme brush, beautiful applicator to use, crevices, grooves in these areas. Work in one direction with a paintbrush. Foam roller, you can change direction as well. Just remember, nothing that I say is law. The only time when it comes to me saying something and it's a rule is when I speak to my husband. Other than that, you are free to try your own things, and maybe you have come across an easier way of doing things, and go for it and share with us. We are always open to learn. I'm just sharing ideas and tips with you that I found works easy for me when I paint. But no rules, no one way of doing anything whatsoever. And I'm just evenly applying my second coat, and I'm making sure that I do it nicely and evenly. Make sure you work with a nice wet paintbrush so that the paint can flow and fill all the grooves and crevices. And most important, enjoy it. You are busy creating something. And for this edge, this frame on the bed pedestal, I will repeat the use of the foam roller just to make sure that this edging is absolutely smooth and beautiful, but I also accomplish a very smooth and even application with the enzyme brush. So while the paint is still wet, my roller has now been dipped in the paint, I will just evenly, lightly roll the frame to make sure it's nice and even. Very light pressure, I hardly press onto the surface. And do it while the paint is still wet, else roughness will occur if you start rolling on paint that's busy drying. I'm using an artist brush to just make sure any blobs of paint are removed in the crevices that are too small for my Hamiltons to reach, just to make sure that everything is nice and smooth and absolutely beautiful. I will now complete my second coat and then I will be back. My second coat is dry, and now very lightly with some paint on my foam roller, I am just rolling a third very even coat just to make sure the application is smooth and beautiful. So just even on the crevices, but this is not a solid application, it's on my dry second coat of paint just to make sure everything is smooth and absolutely beautiful. And then what this also does, it just hides any imperfections that there might have been, and it gives a very smooth, even application of the final finish. And that's beautiful. I'll now leave that to dry and then I'll be back. Something that sometimes happens, especially on very old furniture pieces, is bleeding. Now, bleeding is something that you can't predict. You never know when it's going to happen. It doesn't happen to all furniture pieces, but it does happen when there's a lot of oil absorbed in the wood, and now you're painting and the oil just breathes through the paint. And there is always a way of fixing everything. On this furniture piece, it happened. It's not the paint's fault. It's not your fault. It is life's fault. It's something that happens due to the age of the furniture piece and the amounts of oil it received during its lifetime. Now, how you treat this is the following. Okay, so over here is a very light example of what bleeding can look like. In some instances, it's really severe, and it also is more noticeable if you have sanded the furniture piece first. What we recommend is don't sand, because the varnish keeps everything mostly intact. The moment you remove the varnish layer, that oil can just seep through, and that's when havoc happens. So don't sand, but make sure you clean well with lacquer thinners. Then the appearances are much less. Sometimes when the times where you will also see it much more severely is when the furniture piece has been varnished quite recently. Okay, so then you know, there's a problem. Did I wait 6 months? If not, you need to allow the varnish to cure properly before you start painting. How I'm going to treat this is Tjhoko Paint's Clear Glaze, undiluted, and a paintbrush, and only on those sections I'm going to paint a solid coat of the clear glaze. So I'm only painting clear glaze on the sections where I can see bleeding and not anywhere else. It's not necessary. Now the next step is, after you have done and completed this step, you go drink a glass of wine or gin, you go to bed, and the next day you continue. We don't have time in this session to wait overnight, so I'm quickly going to dry it with a hairdryer. You don't do that. You wait patiently overnight, and the next morning you paint over those sections where you have applied the glaze. Okay, I'll see you now. It's the next day. You had a good night's rest. The glaze has cured for at least 12 hours, and I have just touched up those sections where the bleeding occurred. You are now going to be part of my creative planning process, because I want to wash with various hues of blue, and I'm just going to be playful. So join in with me and let's have fun. I'm going to make use of a foam, a sponge that I bought from P&A, lovely funky sponge, but this creates the most beautiful blending sponged technique. So first of all, you wet it in some water and it becomes soft. Normal kitchen sponges also will work well. I just want to show different techniques with different applications and tools. So there's the sponge, and now we are going to start with a washing technique only on the door, and then we can see what we want to do with the frame and the rest of the pedestal. I'm going to start, so I dry out that most of the water has been removed. I only add a little bit of Danny Stare, only to one section. Make sure I have a clean section. So if I want to blend something, make it lighter, I can manipulate and play around. And I start dabbing onto my furniture piece. And I'm going to continue with some Godfrey's Glimpse. And I make sure where the colors meet, I dab, that there's a beautiful blending happening, even in the crevices. And something I want to do at this stage before I continue, due to the fact that I don't know what's going to happen to the frame yet, is I do want to mask off these sections so they can stay clean and blue free. So I'm going to make sure my hands are clean, something that's a very rare occasion in my life, clean hands. Tip, your paint needs to cure properly, more or less overnight before you can put masking tape to a painted surface, else the masking tape will remove the paint if the paint hasn't cured properly. And I'm just doing the frame. So I just mask off the areas that I don't want to, at this stage, change the color. And now I continue to blend. I will at the end make sure I clean the hardware over here with some thinners to make sure it's nice and clean. And I just dab. actually have a plan for the inside, and you will see I'm trying to keep it as clean as possible. There's reason to that, and I'm just moving my sponge to go into all the crevices and grooves. And now I'm going to go with some cloud white. So the third color I'm adding is some cloud white. Just to make it lighter. And I'm just dabbing. And very lightly in the center, I'm going to add some on my dirty foam piece of sponge, my blues and my white combined, just to add some hues of light. Next, I'm going to rinse out my sponge with some water, and to make sure that all these colors just come together, I'm going to repeat the same process but with Dawn's Wash, the color I used in the beginning to paint the entire surface with. Just need to stretch to reach it. Some Dawn's Wash. Make sure it's evenly distributed into my sponge. Now start at the bottom very lightly and I dab. And with the clean side of the brush, you just dab to blend it in beautifully. So I'm just edging it. And due to the fact that Tjhoko has a built-in sealant, you don't need to be worried painting or working with wet colors on previously painted surfaces without a sealant being applied. You can work with water once the paint has dried. 40 minutes and then play around with various techniques. So it's very forgiving and actually just so easy to work with. So I'm just edging it. First with my blue, then a cleaner side of my sponge. Danny's Dare is the color I'm busy working with. It's a beautiful dark blue. And I'm going to remove this so you can see what I'm doing. And now this you can also do with various colors. It doesn't need to be blue, it can be neutrals. If you are a neutral person, absolutely beautiful. We just find colors work well on a screen, and it's just so inspirational to see color. What I'm going to do, in my crevices, I have an artist brush. So I'm just going to make sure it's clean, and then I'm going to paint thin lines in my crevices. Make sure my sponge is clean, and if I want to wipe away any of the paint that I have painted, I will simply wipe away with my clean sponge. And this is actually a beautiful technique to use on a wall surface to create a beautiful mural, by just using color or neutrals, whatever makes you happy. Okay, so I have an artist brush. My color again is Danny's Dare. I just want to accentuate the crevices, so I'm going to paint in them. Take my foam, my sponge, just dab, lightly wipe, that it doesn't look so solid, just creates more of a washed effect. I have completed now the white sections, and I love the washing technique. It's absolutely beautiful. I have printed out, I only have an A4 printer, so I need to join these two images. I was thinking of joining them like that. This is what the initial printed piece looked like, but it was very white. So what I have done is I have just dabbed some blues and also some Dawn's Wash on this printed sheet. So I'm just going to repeat it over here as well, just to make everything blend in better so that the colors just marry. So I just take my blue on my foam, on the sponge, make sure it's not too wet, and I'm just subtly changing the color on my printed sheet. Normal free printable piece of paper from the internet. And there's some Dawn's Wash. I'm just going to touch with some Dawn's Wash as well so that the colors just work with what I have done on this furniture piece. Make sure it's more or less the same than what I've done on this one. And I'm happy. And now I'm going to funcopauge this. Now from Hilton has taught this to us once when we had a nice get together. Something we have shown before, just to show how easy and cost effective it can be to change an old furniture piece. So what I'm going to use is the clear glaze. And sorry for those that have seen it before. This is purely for those that haven't seen it. So it's 3 parts glaze. It's a concentrated sealant, but it is so versatile. You can use it for so many things. So 1, 2, 3 parts glaze, 1 part water. I use cooled down boiling water. Then whatever is left, I can pour back into a container and reuse. Tap water will contaminate. And now just make sure that my planning is in place. So this will be the top one, this will be the bottom one. And what I might do is I will adhere it. Let's do it like this. Let's see it, either paintbrush or dipping. So I'm going to dip it. Make sure your hands are clean, free of paint. I have not washed mine, but you should. So I dip it through the glaze. the piece of paper. I make sure I put it onto the surface and I press it down in all those grooves and crevices. Make sure you have a cloth available just to wipe any excess. And push down. We will, once this is dry, take a piece of sandpaper or even a nail file and just remove everything on this edge that's not supposed to be there. I will press it down up to here, use my finger and just patiently get rid of any air bubbles. Okay, so what I want to do is I want this to stop here on the edge of this detail. So I'm just making a fold there that the paper actually doesn't get stuck onto the surface, but it's easier for me to remove once the glaze has dried completely. So I'm just folding my paper patiently, a nice straight line, so it doesn't adhere to the painted surface. Here will be easy. I will be just cutting it away. My first piece is on. I am so excited. So I've just made sure I fold it on the areas where I don't want it to adhere to the painted surface. Remove any excess glaze while it's still wet. Just wipe it in, and then I'm going to do exactly the same with this sheet of paper, and then I'll be back. Okay, so the funcopauge is on. I am just going to make sure I apply a nice coat of glaze everywhere where I might see that it needs some extra glue, and then there is no way around this. You need to allow this to cure and dry overnight before we can sand all the loose bits off and make sure that our furniture piece is absolutely beautiful for use. With Tjhoko has a building sealant, so I am not going to worry to seal any of these sections with a clear glaze. But if you want a more of a subtle satin finish instead of a matte finish, or you want to add extra protection to your surface, you want to make it water resistant and UV resistant, you can seal it with a clear glaze. Very important when working with a clear glaze is to allow the paint to dry for at least 4 hours before working with it. There are videos on our YouTube channel that show the application. We work with a damp microfiber cloth, and you can also manipulate the sheen level of the glaze. I like to work with equal quantities glaze and water and apply with a damp microfiber cloth. I will be back tomorrow. You won't only see me tomorrow, just in a little bit, and then we'll have the final styling ready. I did go to bed and I did have a warm bath, and this morning I started sanding our funcopauge section. This is something that is looking so beautiful, but some advice I do want to offer. If you have pieces hanging over, so that the glaze doesn't stick everything together or stick where you have already painted. If it does happen and you need to remove it and the glaze removes your paint, you can literally just touch up. I had to do it some places, okay? And then I started sanding, and you can see on the areas over here, I sanded hard, but I've done it deliberately so that I can see some of the wood and that the wood just blends in with what is happening at the top, that there's just a flow of texture throughout the furniture piece. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you now how to sand the funcopauge. So I have a 100 grit piece of sandpaper, not a big piece, so that you can very gently, delicately work on your furniture piece. The best is to fold it. So that I've done already last night, the leftover piece, and just make sure that it didn't adhere to the area where I don't want it to stick onto. And now I lightly sand And the glaze actually hardens the paper, and you pull away. Sand, pull away, sand, pull away, and then you can decide how much harder you do want to sand, if you do want to show some wood or not. And then my piece is off, and I just want some different colors. It's like a two-tone distressing where you can see different colors on the surface revealing due to the Dawn's Wash base coat we've painted. So there you can see how the Dawn's Wash is coming through where I'm sanding. Okay, so I've distressed the edges. The way I've done it is also a piece of sandpaper, and this is actually something that happens during the making process. As you stand back, you see and you realize that something is short, or you want to change something, or you might feel I just want to leave it as is. So it's part of the creative process. I just felt something was needed. This is raw timber, and now all of this is painted solid, so I just want to have some timber show here and there. So I've sanded the edges. I'm going to do the same now on this side, and just look how beautiful this is washed with the same sponge that I've shown on the front side. We've done it here with the Danny's Day and the Godfrey's Glimpse, Cloud White and Dawn's Wash, just to create an ombre effect. I actually cannot wait to do this on a wall. Small piece of sandpaper. I'm going to use another piece of the 100 grit again, that just to show how I sand. So I'm simply making sure I press nice and hard. And this is not something you have to do. So if you like the solid painted look and feel, just leave it as is. It all depends on personal preference. And I'm going to do the same at the top. Just get a comfortable. Something I was thinking of last night when I went to bed. When you paint a furniture piece like this, it would be much easier to lay it flat. Due to the fact that I'm filming, it was impossible for me to do that, else you would never be able to see what I was doing. So if you would lay it flat, it would be much easier to lay out the paper, glaze, have more control on what you're doing. So I will just subtly distress this. And the same with the side. Okay, so the sanding process is quite simple, and you decide where you want to do this. I don't think we need to spend more time on this. Then I'm going to share some tips on styling. This is so beautiful. I am so pleased with how this came out. Once again, is he being silly? Maestro just had a conversation with us. Once again, you will decide on colors that fits your space, that fits your personal preference. And what I'm doing is I'm sharing ideas and techniques. It's Maestro, it's not my stomach. Next, we are going to style. So on here we have Nia. Nia, Maestro. Maestro, jy moet jou gedra. Maisie, wat is die probleem? Sit mooi? Sit mooi? Sit mooi? Sê vir my, wat is die probleem? Waar is jou suurlemoen? Waar is hy? Waar is hy? Ek het hom nie gehad nie. Waar is jou suurlemoen? I'm going to use this furniture piece that was meant to be a bed pedestal in a bathroom. and then put all the hand towels inside. I will still be painting the inside, and most probably I will also wrap the shelves, something I haven't done, or even stencil of Paris them, that there's nice texture. And then what I'm going to put on top, due to the fact that this is raw timber, if I put something wood on top of the wood, it will just disappear. So we need contrast. So Crystal and myself have been looking in my house what we can source. Seeing that this is going to be in a bathroom, you can put bath crystals in here, and this will also repeat the blues that we've used on the furniture piece. This actually complements the neutrals beautifully again. Just a console jar that we've also painted with Tjhoko paint. When painting on glass, clean well with lacquer thinners, paint under stress, and then due to the fact that we are going to use it in a bathroom, just a container filled with some cotton wool. And there we have something beautiful. Fresh flowers in a bathroom is always nice. And then we are done. Thank you for your patience. This has been quite a journey, but it's a rewarding journey. Something that I want to share with you for the week that follow is never underestimate the power that being nice to other people has. It's something that we all need in times like this. If we want to say something and it's not nice, rather just keep quiet. And if you want to say something nice, put it out there. It's something that makes others feel loved and cared for, especially in times like these. So let's be nice to each other. Let's be sincere in this week that follows, especially with Easter that's around the corner. Let's remember our roots and let's stay creative. Till next week.